In a thriller, there's no second chance. You either keep the tension tight, the pressure rising, and the threat personal, or you're going to lose your reader. And that's because a thriller is all about escalation, the feeling that something dreadful is closing in, and the terrifying realization that the person responsible might know you better than you know yourself. In this video, we're covering the 5 non-negotiable elements that define the thriller genre, the key scenes that every thriller needs, and how to keep tension escalating so your story doesn't flatline. A real thriller is already actually a genre blend of action, horror, and the detective mystery. And crucially, it's a predator-prey story where survival isn't physical, it's emotional, psychological, and moral too. The protagonist is being hunted and every move they make seems to tighten the noose. But thrillers aren't truly focused on explosions or puzzles, they're about the pressure cooker and personal stakes. So how do you write one that doesn't just follow the formula, but grabs your reader by the throat and doesn't let go? The predator-prey dynamic is the core of every great thriller. Sometimes it's a battle, but it's always a hunt. And your job as a writer is to make the reader feel like the net is closing with every chapter and scene. So what makes a thriller a thriller? What are those 5 non-negotiable elements that you need to include to deliver on the thriller's promise? First is the predator. Your antagonist is not just the bad guy, they're the engine of dread in your story. And what makes terror terrifying isn't just the violence, but the intelligence behind it too. The predator has a plan, they're 2 steps ahead of your protagonist, and worse, they're adapting to every move. The villain isn't passively waiting, they should be actively shaping the story. Think of Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men. He's not only chasing, he is literally creating the sense in the audience and characters in that story world of escape being impossible, and of Chigurh himself being an unstoppable force. That's what makes the predator terrifying. They change the rules or seem to elude them as the story unfolds. And that's why thrillers aren't just stories of conflict, they're about the collapse of safety and the collapse of what had been taken for granted. Because when your antagonist can shift the battlefield, your hero isn't only fighting to win, they're fighting to survive their own unraveling. And that brings us into the second element, the prey. Your protagonist should be the prey. They're not going to be a hero yet, they're going to be something that the story is going to test over and over and over to shape them into that. And what makes a thriller protagonist engaging isn't their power, it's how far out of their depth that they're pushed. Every decision, every misstep brings the threat closer. The stakes aren't just physical, they're emotional, personal, and often even existential too. And to understand how to create a protagonist whose beliefs and personal paradigm can be challenged in the course of your story, go and check out my video on character creation. Because a thriller relies on straining their internal world. What creates a thriller's heartbeat isn't just about the survival of the protagonist, but the transformation that they seek being under threat. It's challenging the protagonist to survive and evolve or be destroyed. Then we come to escalation, and this is that tightening noose and ticking clock. In a thriller, suspense dies when the story gets bigger, because the less intensely personal the stakes, the more diluted the pressure will feel. The thriller lives when the world gets smaller, when the doors are closing, when time is running out. Escalation means every new development increases the danger while decreasing control. It's not about throwing more obstacles at your protagonist. It's actually often about removing their options instead. In The Fugitive, every move that Dr. Kimball makes brings him closer to both the truth and the marshal hunting him. And that shrinking space between the predator and prey is where your real tension will thrive. And that leads us into the trap. And this is often the climax. And more than a fight, it's a reckoning, the moment where the prey is going to be the most exposed. They've lost control and they're out of time, and the predator has the upper hand. The trap is where the story asks its deepest question. Will survival come at the cost of everything else? It's the moment of emotional exposure, not just physical vulnerability. And finally, we have the psychological game. This is the secret weapon of every great thriller. The predator doesn't just chase, they are manipulating. They crawl inside the protagonist's mind. They don't just block progress, they anticipate it. And that's why a simple conversation in a thriller can often become as tense as a car chase. In Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter is locked up behind glass, and yet he dominates the emotional landscape of the story. And that's not through force, it's through his psychological control. When the villain can get inside your protagonist's head, every scene can become a minefield. Now that you understand the 5 core elements every thriller needs, it's time to talk about when those elements hit and how they're going to come together to build something with unforgettable tension. Because while thrillers are reliant on strong pacing, they're also about delivering key emotional moments in scenes that force your protagonist to break, adapt, or fall apart. Let's start with the inciting threat. This is where your predator makes their first move. While it's often violent and over the top, it doesn't have to be, but it does have to be something that becomes personal. This is the moment that marks the protagonist and tells the reader and audience this story has already begun and you're already being hunted. Because we don't need action to feel tension, we need intention and fear by leveraging the personal stakes. Next is the midpoint predator win, and this is where the balance of power shifts halfway through the story. The predator scores a win and the story tilts from tension into dread. The audience should now feel it. They understand that this might not end well. In No Country for Old Men, Chigurh gets the tracker and now he's closing in, and now it's not a chase story anymore, it's become a countdown. Then comes your climactic sequence when the protagonist is at the mercy of the villain. This is the moment of maximum vulnerability we touched on earlier, where the prey is exposed, the predator is close or closing in, and maybe already inside, and we, the audience, don't know how it's going to end. In Silence of the Lambs, Clarice is trapped in a pitch black basement while Buffalo Bill stalks her with night vision goggles. She's disoriented, isolated, and completely helpless, and all we can do is hold our breath. In The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Mikkel is invited into Martin's home, and Martin calmly leads him into the basement, locks the door, and straps him to a chair. Martin plays music as he prepares to kill him. So now let's answer that question we raised at the start. How do you keep escalating tension without your story going stale? And the secret is that it's almost never about adding more events. If you've watched my other videos, you'll know that events don't equal a story. It's about repositioning the power, shifting the balance between the predator and prey throughout. And just as important is varying the kind of pressure you're applying. Physical danger is obvious, but it should also have emotional manipulation going on. Ethical traps, psychological unraveling. Don't just raise the stakes, try and change the stakes, because that's what makes pressure compound. Increasing the challenges and pain for your protagonist by making the stakes affect their internal world, what they have believed about their world and their place in it, as much as you're threatening them in the external world, is how you're going to land the heaviest punches. In the best thrillers, even when your protagonist wins, they lose something inside them. Time, trust, control, whatever. And even if they survive, they're often left more vulnerable than they were before. And when you build a thriller this way, including what we've covered here, you won't just keep people hooked, you'll make them lean forward on the edge of their seat because they'll feel like the walls are closing in. Now you know what makes a thriller actually work. We've covered how tension isn't just about speed or spectacle, it's about pressure, escalation, and the sense of control slipping away. And you're going to escalate that by shifting power, changing the rules, and cornering your characters as the price of survival becomes urgent and personal. If you want your thriller to really hit deep, then the next step is to build a setting that's going to amplify your thriller DNA and a protagonist who makes the cost of survival emotionally unavoidable. So if you're ready to explore what happens when thrillers get morally complex, then check out my crime video, where I'm going to dive deep in helping you understand how to add ethical stakes and moral gravity to every twist.